The topic of Rosewood started as something that the older generation alluded to in passing conversation about the state of Florida's racial past. They'd say things like, and you know how they killed up and ran off all them people up there in Rosewood. Admittedly, I had heard of it in passing, but had not discovered the details of the disgraceful attack. The story is well documented in a book called Like Judgment Day by Michael D'Orso. It detailed the lead up to the events all the way through the court case that awarded the survivors and their descendants. I highly recommend it, especially the audiobook version, and will leave a link in the description below. Rosewood was named for the reddish appearance of wood from the cedar trees that drove the economy in the area. This black town housed men who made a living from the surrounding swamps, be it trapping animals, harvesting turpentine, or participating in the lumber industry. The women of Rosewood usually worked in the white counterpart town named Sumner. In this town, a white woman named Frances Fannie Taylor alleged the black man beat her on January 1st, 1923. Sarah Carrier, a Rosewood resident and houseworker in Sumner, said that Fannie had likely been beaten by a railroad worker named John Bradley, with whom she was known to have had an affair. The 7-day wrath of terrorism that ensued was nothing less than repulsive. Levi County Sheriff Robert Elias focused on finding a recently escaped black prisoner named Jesse Hunter. By now, another group acting outside of the sheriff's authority was beginning to cause havoc. They tortured Sam Carter to a confession, executed him, and hung his body as intimidation. Aaron Carrier, Sarah's nephew, was dragged to Sumner and taken into custody by the sheriff for his own safety. Things really fell apart when a mob approached the home of Sarah Carrier, where many children had gathered for safety. A shootout ensued that is alleged to have claimed from 4 to over a dozen lives. Sylvester Carrier, a man known for taking no crap from white racists in the area, and his mother, Sarah Carrier, were found dead at the home. The children escaped to the wooded swamps behind the home for safety. The events at the Carrier house sparked an influx of white mobs. People falsely heard that there was a black mob killing whites in a race war instead of the one-sided massacre that was actually unfolding in Rosewood. In the escalation that followed the shootout at Sarah Carrier's home, houses were torched and anything that ran out was shot dead by white mobs. Anyone able enough was told to flee into the swamps and get away as far as possible. The entirety of Rosewood was burned down and bodies were piled into mass graves with little or no marking. The only thing left is the home of John Wright, the only white resident of Rosewood at the time. Wright ran a store in town and was known to have aided in the escape of several black children with the help of the Bryce brothers who owned a train. After Rosewood was burned down, Wright was seen as an N-word lover and ostracized by the community until the day he died. The work of St. Petersburg Times reporter Gary Moore brought the story to light as many survivors showed signs of PTSD and either didn't talk of Rosewood or weren't believed when they did. His series of articles in 1982 was the first time in decades Rosewood had publicly been addressed. With the help of a descendant, Arnett Doctor, the article sparked a reunion of sorts. Other survivors who had been separated ever since 1923 came together again. Eventually, the group of survivors managed to win a case against the state of Florida for denying them the protections they were due as United States citizens. $150,000 was paid to each survivor. Again, this is just a brief summary based upon the sources that I have studied. There may be a mini-series that goes more in depth to follow. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and as always, links to sources are in the description. As far as my own personal experience, it was a long 3-hour drive, but I felt the need to go see the town for myself. What I got from my efforts is a feeling that can only be described as empty. To show up and see a historical plaque and nearby tree recently decorated with beads as the only symbols was one thing. After all, I had been studying Rosewood for weeks by now and knew there wasn't anything black left to speak of. But to see long dirt driveways decorated with Confederate flags on land that you know had such a massacre occur on it made something very apparent to me. There is a very clear enemy to all things black, and it still exists among us the same way it did then. Anything of worth in our community must be guarded from this enemy. The platform you are watching now is my way of defending our minds and our history. Until the next episode, peace, love, and positivity.